absolute truth. So there are 3 verses in chapter 7, canto 1, that describe the realization of Srila Vyasadeva, who was meditating on the absolute truth with devotion, on the instruction of his guru, Srila Narada Muni. Narada Muni has instructed him by telling the story of his past life, and then he disappeared. He's following these instructions of Narada Muni, meditating of the absolute truth with devotion, and its realizations are discussed here in 3 verses. We discussed already the previous verse, the verse 4, and 5, 6, 7, describe also his realizations. I think this text 5 today is essential, because these verses, they expand later into the Bhagavatam, so it's very essential knowledge. And we will see in this text 5, Prabhupada's purport is very long, because it's going so deep. Every sentence is important. So we will go to the purport, but we will first read the Sanskrit word-for-word translation, hear the translation, and then I will summarize you the purport. And then we will go to the purport line by line and discuss. So before we read from the Srimad Bhagavatam, we glorify the Supreme Personality of Krishna with the following words. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
The Sanskrit. Chaya samohito jiva atmanam trigunatmakam paropi manute nastham tatkritam sabhipachyate. Word for word translation. Chaya, by whom? Samohitaha, illusioned. Jiva, the living entities. Atmanam, self. Triguna atmakam, conditioned by the 3 modes of nature, or products of matter. Paraha, transcendental. Api, in spite of. Manute, takes it for granted. Anartam, things not wanted. Tat, by that. Kritam, kritamcha, reaction. Apipachyate, undergoes thereof. Translation and purport by Abhayacharya Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki. Due to this external energy, the living entity, although transcendental to the 3 modes of material nature, thinks of himself as a material product, and thus undergoes the reactions of material miseries. I repeat, due to this external energy, the living entity, although transcendental to the 3 modes of nature, thinks himself as a material product and thus undergoes the reactions of material miseries. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamini. Namaste Saraswata Devi Gauravani Pacharini. Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskachai Dasatarani. Srila Prabhupada Ki. The Srila Prabhupada here explains that the root cause of material existence is that we think ourselves a material product, the body, the subtle body. And that's the real reason why we are suffering material miseries. So we are undergoing a perverted thinking, feeling, and willing, Srila Prabhupada said, under material conditions. But in our normal condition, in the liberated states, when we are not covered by subtle and a gross body, the soul has its own thinking, feeling, and willing in its original state, in its service to Krishna in the spiritual world. But that thinking, feeling, and willing is only focused on Krishna and service to Krishna. And the spiritual body you cannot use for material purposes, egoistic purposes. Because our thinking, feeling, and willing in this material world is done under material conditions to get pleasure, to get sense gratification. And therefore it is perverted. And this thinking, feeling, and willing is done by the subtle body. The subtle body existing of mind, intelligence. And because this mind and intelligence are contaminated by material nature, because they are used, or they are made of material nature. They are used for material purposes. This is a manifestation of our false ego. The false ego that we think we are a material product. And therefore, in the conditioned state, we understand that theoretically, but we don't have practical realization. Because actual knowledge is realized transcendental knowledge, but our actual knowledge is covered by nescience. Illusory energy. Why is this illusory energy there, Srila Prabhupada explains? Why is it there? It's for the reformation of conditioned souls. So it is supposed to help our surrendering process to Krishna. That's the remedial measure. The conclusion of Bhagavad Gita. Surrender unto me, Krishna says. And that surrendering process, Srila Prabhupada said, begins with hearing about Krishna. So how are we reformed in this material world? Because this material world is meant for our reformation, re-education in spiritual matters. Reformation. We have to come from the desire to exploit material nature again to the desire to serve Krishna. And how does the material energy help with that? The material energy helps because it's a punishment. It's a punishment that we are in this body. I hear my spiritual master Bhakti Charamaj many times he said that. Do you realize this body is a machine to give you pain? That's the reality. What pleasure can a finger give to you? And what pain can it give you? Much more pain than pleasure. So the reformation happens in two ways, Srila Prabhupada said. The material nature is punishing you. You want to enjoy, you will get only frustration. That you get the opposite you desire. And that is a punishment. And at the end, death. It's all gone, all your endeavors, not all for nothing. But Krishna helps as the Lord within, as a super soul, and also the spiritual master helps. to go to that process of reformation by engaging us in sadhana bhakti, in serving Krishna in so many ways, so that our focus and our interest becomes connected with Krishna. And then by that engagement, we get realized knowledge little by little. And we come to the point to understand the position of the Lord and the living entity, that we are different. That we, the jiva, we are illusioned, we are controlled by material nature, and the Supreme Lord is fully cognizant, all-pervading, all-knowing, never under the influence of Maya, never the controller of Maya. So, Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada said, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is the remedy for suffering humanity. That we need to realize finally the relation between the Supreme Lord and the living entity is transcendental and eternal. In fact, our relationship with Krishna cannot be broken. That because we are always in the energy of the Lord, and we are always serving through the energy of the Lord. Service is the dharma of the living entity. Dharma means what cannot be changed. The occupational duty of all living entities. What is everything doing? Everyone is serving. But devotees are serving Krishna directly under the instruction of the spiritual master. And those who are conditioned, they are serving Krishna through the material energy. But they are both under control of Krishna. So that's a summary of this very important purport. Now we will go to the purport, the section by section. So the purpose is on the screen. I will start with the first sentence. The root cause of suffering by the materialistic living beings is pointed out with remedial measures which are to be taken, and also the ultimate perfection to be gained. So three things we find here in this verse. The root cause of suffering, the bodily identification with matter. How to get out of this bodily identification, how to get out of it is by hearing about Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam is about Krishna, hearing about Krishna. And then the ultimate perfection will be gained, is liberation from matter and regaining of our natural position of a spirit soul serving Krishna. So all this is mentioned in this particular verse, so we can understand this cause of suffering that will be described throughout the whole Bhagavatam. And it is interesting. The cause of our suffering, bodily identification. So if you want to make spiritual advancement, we must see the truth of material life. And at the same time, we should connect with the bliss of devotional service. Materially, we are very pessimistic. Very pessimistic, because we see the truth. Because at the other side, you have the spiritual reality. We see also the spiritual reality. And that is Srila Vyasadeva sees both the materialistic position and the spiritual reality. So many will come in contact with devotees, they think these devotees are very negative. But devotees see reality. But we see material nature as negative. One may say to be overly negative is psychologically unhealthy because our goal of life is to be happy. Srila Prabhupada says in a lecture in answer to that. To be optimistic about material life is animal life. So first stage of surrender to Krishna is rejecting what's unfavorable to devotional service. So this material conception is unfavorable. We must come in the consciousness directed toward Krishna. So we should not maintain illusory expectations of material life. But of course, we all maintain to some degree aspirations to enjoy the material world. But that may be to a certain extent. But the truth must be our goal. If we do not see the reality of the material world, then we will have to experience the defects of material existence. Old age, disease, and finally death. We have to look beyond our material illusory expectations. Otherwise, we will see the ghastly form of material nature. Arjuna, he saw this universal form, or it was in the form of time, was eating all living entities. Time I am, the destroyer of everyone, Krishna says. In this material world, one living entity is food for another. Life is a struggling with danger at every step. Even we saw also Srila Prabhupada in his mission, we have to go to so many difficulties and dangers. A lot of hardship is going on in the material world. In South Africa, somewhere in the forest there to kill a lioness. And then they found out she was pregnant. And there were orphan cubs. And they grew up. In the beginning, very nice cubs. But then later on, they became big lions, pure killing machines. And then they have to shoot them. Then they were realizing, what are we doing? That's the material world. If we live for the senses, we live in vain. All material nature, temporary results. But we need balance. We need to integrate this reality of the material world and function in a healthy way in the world. It's not that we tell everyone without discrimination, this world is a world of suffering. No. We must practice austerity of speech, especially towards those who are not devotees. Otherwise, we will increase their anxiety. They will not be interested in Krishna consciousness. Austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others. So we don't have to agitate the mind of others. One must tell only the truth to the extent others can digest. Otherwise, they will be disgusted. not interested in Krishna consciousness. That means we have to be mature in our preaching. Because materialists, they become depressed. They do not have any other alternative. But as we progress in devotional service, we must invest less in the material energy. But that must go together with a greater investment in Krishna consciousness. That then, as such, one becomes mature. Because frustration, anger, it's useless in this world. We must understand the bigger picture and take shelter of Krishna. See also the spiritual energy. And how to get there are these remedial measures. Hearing about Krishna. It begins with hearing. So the real war has to be fought in our heart. And for that we need guidance. We need to develop spiritual intelligence. So we must know the cause of our suffering, how to get out of it, hearing about Krishna, and ultimate perfection, surrender to Krishna and loving Krishna. So we can understand this is explained further in the Bhagavatam in many verses. In the 4th canto, you have Narada Muni explained to King Prajina Barishad so many chapters about the futility of material nature, to get them out of these ritualistic ceremonies for enjoyment and karmakanda. Was a big job to get him out of it. But with us, that's the same. We are so attached to enjoyment. We cannot give it up. That's Srila Prabhupada writes, yes. The living entity is by constitution transcendental to material engagement, but he is now imprisoned by the external energy and therefore thinks himself one of the material projects. We are imprisoned in the material energy. We are souls, we are imprisoned in this body. What makes the connection? We need to understand. First, on the absolute platform, there is no connection between the soul and the body. There is no connection. But the symptom of the soul is consciousness. And the consciousness becomes polluted by these modes of material nature. And that makes us identify with the body, false ego. So it's due to this ignorance. And getting out of this ignorance means hearing about the spirit soul, that we are not a body, and how to act of the spiritual soul, and how to free us. That will free us from this connection with the material body. And we become liberated, even in this body. Liberated means Nashosti Nakangsati, the Brahma Buddha platform, spiritual platform. No hankering, no desire. But we think we are in contact with this body. And due to this unholy contact, by the pollution of our consciousness, the pure spiritual entity suffers material miseries under the modes of material nature. We are controlled by these modes. And how we are controlled, controlled or bound by these modes. In Bhagavad Gita is explained the mode of passion binds us by greed we want to enjoy. And the mode of ignorance by passion. And the mode of ignorance by madness, sleep, indolence. And the mode of goodness is also binding. We think everything is good. But no, nothing is good. Even in the mode of goodness, you will become old, diseased, and so on. So the living entity misunderstands himself to be a material product. So we have we identify with the likes and dislikes of this body. That gives me pain and that gives me pleasure. But that's for the body, not for the soul. Then what the soul needs is love, and we connect it with Krishna. There's nothing to do with these pleasures and this suffering. The suffering of the body is experienced in the mind. It's a material experience. But we think we are the mind. We identify with the mind. But the idea is one who advances in spiritual consciousness, he becomes unaware of the material body. When Prabhupada was in London, when he became sick, very sick, his body. He was lying in that bed most of the day. And the devotee asked Prabhupada, are you suffering? And Prabhupada said, I don't feel anything. That because his consciousness was in Krishna, not in the body. That we think ourselves a material product. And due to this unholy contact, a pure spiritual entity suffers material miseries under the modes of material nature. The living entity misunderstands him to be a material product. We think I'm man, I'm a woman, I'm American, I'm Indian, that I've this profession, that so we identify with it. And it's very strong, this identification, but it's wrong. This means that the present perverted way of thinking, feeling, and willing under the material conditions is not natural for him. But he has his normal way of thinking, feeling, and willing. And that is very important to understand this point. When we were in the spiritual world, in our spiritual body, at a certain moment we want to rebel. Why is Krishna always enjoying and controlling? I also want to control and enjoy. And Krishna said, are you sure? Do you want this? And we said, yes. So, good, said Krishna, that there's one problem. I'm the enjoyer and proprietor of everything. But I will fulfill your desire. But you have to forget me. That's the first thing. We forget Krishna. And then we get a subtle and gross body. We like a costume, two costumes, two clothes, underwear and overwear and overgarments, a subtle and a gross body. And the subtle body is created because of our material desires. And we develop a thinking, feeling, and willing, a thinking for enjoying, a feeling for enjoying the senses, and a willing and a desire to enjoy. And that's all in the subtle body. And then we identify with this body. And our original spiritual thinking, feeling, and willing for serving Krishna of the spiritual body is inactive. It's inactive. But we can revive that original thinking, feeling, and willing. But to revive that, we have to spiritualize the subtle body. Spiritualizing the subtle body means killing it. Because it's due to this subtle body that we take one gross body over another. How do you kill the subtle body? How do you get rid of it? It's by spiritualization. That when we hear about Krishna, then our intelligence will be purified. And our mind will be purified. We hear about Krishna, we hear transcendental knowledge. This transcendental knowledge, hearing this transcendental knowledge purifies our intelligence. Hearing about Krishna, have Krishna in your mind, it purifies your mind. And when they are purified, then the material subtle body is gone. And we regain our thinking, feeling, and willing again with the spiritual body. And therefore, Narada Muni gave his example of his previous life, how he got back his spiritual body, identifying with his spiritual body. How did he get back? How did he get it back? By hearing from the sages, the Bhagavatam, from the Bhaktivedantas. And then after that, after hearing from the Bhaktivedantas, he practiced the chanting of the holy names. He practiced the chanting of the holy names. And surely, by practicing this chanting of these holy names, his heart became purified and it came in contact with Krishna in the heart. And finally, he got his spiritual body. It was like a flash and lightning. Death came and he was in his spiritual body. But because during his life already, his spiritual body became active by devotional service. And when your spiritual body becomes active, also your memory becomes eternal. Therefore, he could remember his previous life. And that is a sign that the spiritual body becomes active. Bharat Maharaj also, he went to 3 lives. And he remembered his previous lives. So, how to come to that point? Yashari dasye karmanamana sagari nikalash abhavasyasu Shiva Mukta Sauchate. This situation is Shiva Mukta, liberated even within the body. And that can be attained, Rupa Goswami says, by using our body, words, mind, and all convictions in the service of Krishna, always without any interruption. And then we get our original state with our original thinking, feeling, willing, and feeling power. Because Krishna consciousness is about spiritual emotions, Bprs, as explained in devotional service. And that's the greatest spiritual enjoyment we can imagine. Being in our, it is the experience of transcendental emotions, like Mother Yasoda felt for Krishna, like the gopis felt for Krishna, like the cowherd boys felt for Krishna, that like Arjuna felt for Krishna, like Mother Queen Kunti felt to Krishna. It's ecstatic feelings of love. But now, Srila Prabhupada writes, it's also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that the actual knowledge of the conditioned soul is now covered by nescience. In the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Avitam jnanam etena jnana nityavarinam kamrupena kantara dushprenana lenacha. What covers the soul is the nescience coming from lust. So lust is enemy number 1. It makes us endeavoring for getting benefit of this body, enjoyment of this body, and that desire for increasing material enjoyment is never satisfied. It increases and increases, and that's the nescience that Srila Prabhupada writes. Thus, the theory that the living entity is absolute impersonal Brahman is refuted herein. This cannot be because the living entity has his own, as his own way of thinking in his unconditional state also. So we are individuals in our spiritual state. Our own thinking, feeling, willing means individual, not impersonal. Krishna is not impersonal. He's a person, and we can have relationship with him. So the present conditional state is due to the influence of the external energy, which means that illusory energy takes the initiative while the Supreme Lord is aloof. That we are taking the initiative. The soul desires. And because we desire to enjoy in this material world, we are put in these conditions by our own desires. We are the victims of our own desires. But Krishna does not want it. He orders his external energy. The external energy is aware of this fact, but she accepts the thankless task of keeping the forgotten soul under illusion by a bewildering influence. She does that under the order of Krishna. But the Lord does not interfere with the task of the illusory energy, because such performance of the illusory energy are also necessary for the reformation of the conditioned souls. Therefore, there is every endeavor for enjoyment leads to suffering. One who tries to enjoy in this world, he will suffer. And that is the material energy. So, this is the task of Durga. Durga is Krishna's material energy, was this task. But Durga is an expansion of Krishna's spiritual energy, which is represented by Radharani. So Srimati Radharani expands herself in all Lakshmis in the spiritual world, but also as Durga in the material world. Because these are the energies of the Lord. Durga in the material world is called Prakriti, material nature. But Krishna orders the Durga to punish all the conditioned souls. So that they become frustrated, so that they give up their desire to enjoy. And why does Krishna do that? Here, an affectionate father does not like his children to be chastised. So an affectionate father does not like his children to be chastised by another agent. Yes, he puts his disobedient children under the custody of a severe man just to bring them to order. But all affectionate Almighty Father at the same time desires relief for the conditioned soul, relief from the clutches of the illusory energy. So Krishna wants us to get out of it. So the king puts the disobedient citizens within the walls of the jail. But sometimes the king, desiring prisoners' relief, personally goes there and pleads for reformation. And on his doing so, the prisoners are set free. Similarly, the Supreme Lord descends from his kingdom upon the kingdom of the illusory energy and personally gives relief in the form of Bhagavad Gita, wherein he personally suggests that although the ways of illusionary energy are very strict to overcome, one who surrenders at his lotus feet is set free by the order of the Supreme. So here, Prabhupada is paraphrasing a verse of the Bhagavad Gita, verse 7:14. Deva Yesa Gunamaya Mama Maya Drachya Mami Vaye Papachate Maya Medam Transite. This energy of mine is very difficult to overcome. But one who has surrendered to me can easily cross beyond it. So this surrendering process is a remedial measure for getting relief from the bewildering ways of the illusory energy. In Bhagavad Gita, this surrendering process is summarized. Man manabhav madbhakto mam namaskar. Think of me, Krishna says. Come, my devotee, that worship me and offer me obeisance. Surrender unto me, follow my instructions, and don't worry. Machucha, I will take away all this influence of material nature, that all your karmic reactions. I will order Durga to set you free. That so this surrendering process is the remedial measure for getting relief from the bewildering ways of the illusory energy. The surrendering process is completed by the influence of association. That and that's very important, this sentence, because that's the key. We cannot surrender out of our own will if we are strongly under the modes of material nature. That it's a gradual process. But by association with those who are liberated, who are on the liberated platform, we can quickly get out of it. But that association is essential. Without the mercy and association of devotees, we cannot get out of it. If we live with devotees who are advanced, we see how they live, how their consciousness is, how they have given up their bad habits and have new habits in devotional service, which is called sadhana bhakti. That and how they are focused on serving the Lord. So that association is very, very important. Of course, we can associate with Srila Prabhupada through his books. But Srila Prabhupada explained in the purport of the verse, Nastabe Zabatrasu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavatu Tamasre Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. It says, yes, by daily we should hear the Srimad Bhagavatam, rendering service to the pure devotee at the same time, both. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes rather the devotee Bhagavat and the book Bhagavat. One must learn the book Bhagavat from the devotee Bhagavat, the one who has realized Srimad Bhagavatam, has realized Krishna. So the Lord has suggested, therefore, that by the influence of the speeches of saintly persons who have actually realized the Supreme, men are engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So we must, influence of speeches, hearing, again hearing the Bhagavatam, the explanation of the Bhagavatam, that of persons who are realized and who are engaged in loving, in devotional service. So then the conditioned soul gets a taste for hearing about the Lord. And by such hearing only, one is really elevated to the Lord. Hearing, also the same suggestion is made by the Lord in this incarnation of Vyasadeva. This means that the conditioned souls are being reclaimed by the Lord in both ways, so two ways. But at one side, they are punished by the external energy, and at the other side, they are helped by the spiritual master and by Krishna within the heart. Within the heart, every living entity is the Lord, the super soul, and he becomes also the spiritual master from within. From without, he becomes spiritual master in the shape of scripture, saints, and initiator spiritual master. Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. That is explained more detailed in the next shloka, which we will discuss next week. That the importance of hearing from self-realized persons. Now, the last chapter of the report. Personal superintendence of the illusory energy is confirmed in the Vedas, the Kena Upanishad, in relation to the demigod's controlling power. Herein also it is clearly stated that the living entity is controlled by the external energy in a personal capacity. The living being thus subject to the control of the external energy is differently situated. It is clear, however, from the present statement of Bhagavatam that the same external energy is situated in the inferior position by the personality of Godhead, or the perfect being. So there are few things here which are important, that we are under the influence of this prakriti, this eternal energy of the Lord. This is one of the energies of the Lord, material energy. But like Srila writes, like an electrician can use electricity through machines to cool things, refrigerator, or to heat things, a heater. The same energy is used. So Krishna can use his same energy and can make it spiritual for us. But that depends on our desire. It's explained also in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And a devotee has that knowledge that how to turn material energy into spiritual energy. That this in the 4th chapter there are different sacrifices described, and there in 424, Brahmarpanam Brahmaha Vir Brahmakna Brahmana Hutam Brahmaiva Tena Kantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution in spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute, and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. So everything we use in devotional service can be turned from material energy to spiritual energy. We must use things in Krishna's service. That and by that we get out of suffering. We offer our food to Krishna. We have the understanding because all food comes from Krishna. That so he should get the enjoyment first. We offer it to Krishna. And then the food becomes spiritual. It has been touched by this devotional service, touched by Krishna. And then when we eat it, it's purifying us, no karma. It takes our previous karma away. It's purifying. So that a devotee knows how to turn material energy into spiritual energy. And if we are engaged in devotional service, Krishna will order release. This is a long process, but at the end we will get there. That it's a slow process of devotional service, this purification, and we get tests on the way. But once you pass the test, you have passed the test, you are liberated. So the living entity, thus subject to the control of the external energy, is differently situated. It is clear, however, from the present statement of Bhagavatam that the same external energy is situated in the inferior position before the personality of Godhead, or the perfect being. This being, the perfect being or the Lord, cannot be approached even by the illusory energy, who can only work on the living entities. So the living entity, the illusory energy, prakriti, is restricted to this material world. And through this material energy, we cannot come in contact with Krishna, because it is disconnected in our consciousness. The because all energies are connected with Krishna. But we have connected the material energy from Krishna. We see it separate. And Krishna says also, these are my separate material energies. But even the separate material energies, if we use them in Krishna, we can reconnect them. And they become spiritualized. Therefore, it is sheer imagination that the Supreme Lord is illusioned by the illusory energy and thus becomes a living being. So that we have to understand. Material energy exists for us, not for Krishna. For Krishna, all these energies are separated. All these energies are spiritual in nature. But it is our separate mentality to see things different from Krishna, which brings us in contact with this material energy. So if the living being and the Lord were in the same category, then it would have been quite possible. It would have been quite possible for Vyasadeva to see it, and there would have been no question of material distress on the part of the illusioned being. For the Supreme Being is fully cognizant. So there are many unscrupulous imagination on the part of the monist to endeavor to put both the Lord and the living entity in the same category. That's the problem. That Krishna controls everything, every cell in this material world. And we try to control things within this body unsuccessfully, but it's also under the control of Krishna. So had the Lord and the living entity been the same, then Srila Sukadeva Goswami would not have taken the trouble to describe the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, for they would all be manifestations of the illusory energy. But now we come to that point that hearing about Krishna is Srimad Bhagavatam, is the remedy for humanity. It brings us out under the influence of this material nature. So Srila Vyasadeva first of all diagnosed the actual disease of the conditioned soul. They are illusioned by the external energy. He also saw the perfect Supreme Being, but whom the illusory is far removed. Thus he saw both the diseased conditioned souls and the cause of the disease. So he saw Krishna, he saw living entity, he saw the material energy covering the living entity, and he saw the disease from the conditioned soul wanting to enjoy this prakriti and get frustrated and so on. But Krishna is controlling the material nature and the spiritual nature. He's above. And the remedial measures are suggested in this next verse. So this is important to understand in that it is explained at the end of the 15th chapter, Purushottam Yoga. So there it is said, there is the conditioned and the liberated souls. And above the conditioned and the liberated souls, above is the Supreme Lord who controls both. So that is essential to understand. So the remedial measures are suggested in the next verse. Next week will be very important. Both the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity are undoubtedly qualitatively one, but the Lord is the controller of the illusory energy, whereas the living entity is controlled by the illusory energy. Nitya Nityananam, Setya Setyananam. So Krishna is the eternal amongst all eternal, is the maintainer of all other eternals, and he fulfills all the desires of the souls, conditioned or liberated. Dus the Lord and living entity are different. Another point is distinct herein. That eternal relation between the Lord and the living entity is transcendental. Otherwise, the Lord would not have taken the trouble to reclaim conditioned souls from the clutches of Maya. So we have an eternal relationship with Krishna. And Krishna wants our love, wants our relationship back. In the same way, the living entity is also required. To revive is not a love and affection for the Lord. So that's the goal. And that is the highest perfection of living entity. Srimad Bhagavatam treats the conditioned soul with an aim to that goal of life. So Srila Prabhupada says, is there any institution beside ISKCON where every member in the morning and the evening studied Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita to understand the goal of life every day? It's not existing anywhere. It's only part of our inherent of Srila Prabhupada's movement, Krishna's movement. So this is a summary of the purport and the meaning of the purport of this very important verse. Any questions, comments?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Maharaj. Wonderful class, especially explaining how the soul comes under the influence of Maya and what can be done to come out of it. I have one question just from practical aspect, Maharaj. So many times this is a dilemma and the question asked to us, right? Because what of all the like different verses and different scriptures mention, we need to forget everything or disconnect ourselves from material world and focus on Krishna conscious life and Krishna conscious activities. But many people, they feel that, oh, I cannot do this completely. I need some kind of a break, some kind of a leeway, right? Like, for example, in a day, somebody will say, oh, I need a break to at least see the news or, watch something, half an hour or 1 hour, that kind of a break. Or I know, one of the temple president, which I asked, that they close in the weekend because during the weekdays, they put so much effort that on the weekend they say, okay, we need to have a break and we need to go out and connect ourselves with nature. Right? So my question is, like, how to balance that? Should we just say that, no, you should just leave all that and focus 100%?
Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 6:30, this is the vision of an Uttam Adhikar. Yomam pashati sarvata sarvam samaya pashati tasyam na panashami na same na panashati. One who sees me everywhere, in everything, I'm never lost. Nor is he ever lost to me. And that's Krishna consciousness. Learning to see Krishna in everything. It's not the idea that we burn ourselves out. If you burn yourselves out in your service, means you don't have balance. That's another thing. But it's a gradual process of seeing Krishna in this world. At the end, what's the result? You see only Krishna in this world. How Krishna is acting in this world. And there is no material energy for you anymore. That's the perfection. But to come to that stage, we must perform sadhana bhakti in a balanced way. And learn. Bhakti Sarumaharaj explained to all of us that it's like a weightlifter. A weightlifter, it doesn't start with the big weight. It's building up little by little. So we are building up little by little. We follow the morning program, evening program, and during the day we try to think of Krishna during our service. And sometimes that will happen, sometimes not. But in our program, there should also be recreation in Krishna consciousness. If that's not there, then you don't have a balance. That you have sometimes also to do what you like in Krishna consciousness. I like to read Chaitanya Charitamrita, or I like to cook for Krishna, this or that. That otherwise we cannot neglect material nature or material nature. It's a gradual process, and it's an art to be learned. And we will fail sometimes in this art. But success failure is the pillar for success. And we improve and we improve. And we learn by the experience of life how to balance ourselves, how to come to that point of feeling satisfied materially and spiritually. And what that means in practice is for everyone different. But we must always try to improve. That so that's what I could say for Nachana. Any comments?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. And Maharaj, then, but sometimes what happens, like I'll take a simple example. To come out of the pressure of, every day, whatever work, as well as, sadhana and other things, then people purposefully or practicing devotees purposefully or unintentionally then go to the avenues of, watching something or reading news or understanding what's happening in the world. So that takes time away. But then another thing I have seen and experienced myself, then it becomes a type of addiction that if I don't do every day this half an hour or 1 hour, then I don't feel comfortable or I feel something is missing. So how to break that cycle?
Yeah, recreation should be done in Krishna consciousness, not in Maya. That's not that I need a break in Maya. This is due to past bad habits, and we must give them up. The first item of surrender is rejecting what's not favorable for Krishna consciousness. And one must know that looking at mundane films or news or whatever, it's not good for your Krishna consciousness. It's going to poison you. And during the week, you purify yourself, and then you need some break in Maya, and you contaminate yourself again. What's the use? So becoming a devotee means austerity and determination. Should be there. If that's not be there, it's not there, then it's very difficult to make spiritual advancement. A minimum of austerity should be there. That we are not asking the great austerity. Minimum of austerity is following the four relative principles. And absorbing in mundane films and so on, thus creating lusting desires are forms of sex desire, illicit sex, subtle, but it is. So we must be firm in following these principles. Otherwise, it's difficult. And it's true, it's not for everyone. Some will not be able to follow it. Therefore, Prabhupada wanted Varnashram, a lower system for them. But we are not so very far yet. Does that help?
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Really appreciate the time. Yes.
I look forward to see you next week for the most important voice, probably of the three realizations of Yeah, Srila Vyasadeva, meditating on the absolute truth of devotion. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, one question, Maharaj. So Maharaj, this particular class, can we? I was thinking if we can send the link to the US disciples as well as Deland. We have another WhatsApp group. I don't know how many of them will be able to join, but if you are okay, we can start, sharing this weekly class link to those two WhatsApp group. If it is okay, Maharaj.
Yeah, you can do what you want, Purnachandra. From my perspective, I want to be in the background, but what can I say? The purpose is preaching at the end. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Maharaj, and I wish you a safe and happy travel to India.
Yeah, I need all blessings. Hare Krishna. Jai Prabhupada.
Jai Prabhupada. Jai Gurudev.